Live from our hurricane headquarters with real-time analysis from some of the nation's top meteorologists. This is Tracking the Tropics, powered by Bose Electric.
Historic and catastrophic storm Melissa is nearing landfall in Jamaica. We are using these cameras powered by Sea Jamaica. They've given us permission to this, and this is in Kingston Harbor. And that is on the weaker side of this very massive and powerful storm. And that's probably the only reason it still has power and reception, unfortunately. We are joined by our guest meteorologist, Wes Hoffman, from our sister station in Raleigh. And as always, our superstar meteorologist, Juliana Mejia. She does all the heavy lifting for this show, building all of the graphics. Thank you guys so much for joining us. I wish we were here under better circumstances.
Yeah, incredibly busy day for the entire globe is watching what is turned out to be the third strongest hurricane in the Atlantic in history, and we're moments away from landfall, it looks like.
Absolutely. I'm going to switch over to some of Juliana's graphics so that we can see how close we are to landfall. Unfortunately, it's going to be a very long day, despite the fact that landfall is about to occur. Landfall is halftime, basically, and this storm's been moving so incredibly slowly. That's really, in my mind, what's really been the identity of the storm is that slow forward motion. And we were talking about it just before the stream started. Official landfall is when the center of the eye makes its way over land. So even though part of the eye is over land right now, we're still waiting for the official landfall. I'll keep my phone right here because it's going to be any minute now.
It is, I want to zoom in as well on satellite when this kind of gets loaded in here at what almost looks like the eye, not shrinking necessarily, but tightening up for sure as it's now. And like Wes mentioned, the third strongest Atlantic storm on record based on pressure. So there's actually the rankings here having tied now with 892 millibar pressure, the Labor Day hurricane of 1935. And as of right now, since we got that 12 p.m. Update from the National Hurricane Center, likely going to tie, if not be the strongest landfalling hurricane in the Atlantic, period. So unfortunately, something I know all of us are kind of communicating. This is unfortunately the perfect storm in the worst way. All of the key ingredients for the system, sea surface temperatures, lack of wind shear, really came together and whipped up this incredibly still symmetrical storm, this incredibly clear eye, just showcasing the power of the system. So like you said, minutes away here from that official landfall.
And I do want to remind our viewers that this is an interactive program. If you have any questions or you have any comments, if you use our branded hashtags, so hashtag Hey Wes, hashtag Hey Rebecca, or hashtag Hey Juliana, we'll be able to pull those comments from TikTok, from Instagram, from Facebook into our system, and we'll be able to get them answered to you. But let's talk about this eye. We were watching it yesterday. When's it going to go through an eyewall replacement cycle? And the answer was, it's not. And so this has just been also a characteristic of the storm, has been that clean and clear eye that just got stronger and stronger and stronger.
Yeah, and the eye has been so perfectly symmetrical. I mean, if you think in nature throughout our planet, I mean, it's very hard to draw something geometrically sound like we would have in textbooks or like we would produce on the computer. This thing has been so perfectly round. And if you think about it, the Caribbean has been untouched this entire hurricane season. Melissa, the first and only storm to form down there. So that water is perfectly warm and ripe to just fuel this storm to explode into what we saw. So that's probably part of the reason it got so strong. Part of the reason the eye has been so perfect and hasn't needed to go through a eye replacement cycle because, like you guys said, there's been nothing kind of holding it back. The first thing that's going to hold it back is the island of Jamaica. And it looks like this is going to be the strongest hurricane they've ever had in recorded history.
Yes, and they've had some Category 4s, but never a Category 5. We were looking at that yesterday. They had the unnamed storm of 1912. Juliana put together this great graphic. They had Gilbert in 1988, Charlie in 1951, and another unnamed storm in 1903. But Melissa, seems to be making a landfall as a Category 5 storm. And so the damage from this, in addition to how slow it's moving, we've been talking about it all week, the rainfall totals from this system are going to be catastrophic because it's moving so slowly. And that gets particularly rough in mountainous regions, and Wes can speak to this because you are in North Carolina more so than we can here in very flat Florida. But rainfall and flooding when you have valleys is just really devastating.
So you got a valley and you got mountains on each side. You get 20 inches on one side of the valley. You get 20 inches on the other side of the valley. Well, guess what? All 20 inches on each side goes into the valley, and you got a 40-inch situation. And, we've all dealt with slow moving hurricanes. For recent memory, for North Carolina and the Carolinas, it was Florence, which a few years ago was moving at 2 miles an hour. And I know you guys have had some slow moving hurricanes hit Florida, but, not only are they dealing with the wind and the storm surge, but then all of a sudden they've got this storm that's dropping, what is the expectation? 30 to 40 inches of freshwater rain coming from the sky. And that's going to create big problems in the mountains and all the way down to sea level.
And then Jeff and I were talking about this yesterday. And Wes, you touched on this. The reason that it's moving so slow is because it's not battling anything. It's not pushing. It's not getting pushed or pulled by high pressures or low pressures or fronts. And so really it formed in a vacuum, but it formed over some of the deepest, hottest water also. And I think that's going to be something that we learn about from this storm, is that the depth of the hot water there really helped contribute to what was a historic rapid intensification. It went from a tropical storm to a Category 4 storm in less than 24 hours. We've never seen intensification that fast.
It was impressive, to say the least. I mean, breaking records, and it almost feels like we say this each season more and more in recent years, that, having broken numerous records, let alone just, a couple here, but over the course of its life, the storm has been a monster in so many ways.
And listen, that water down there untouched was in some spots in the upper 80s, close to 90 degrees. And y'all know that you got to have minimum 80 to have a tropical system form. And we're 10 degrees warmer than that. So that's why we're seeing what we're seeing. I was doing some calculation. It's only been around a week. It formed as a tropical storm last Tuesday. And in that time, granted, it's zigzagged endlessly, but in that time, the total distance covered has been less than 500 miles.
That's
so
wild.
if you and I were to walk for a week, we could go 500 miles just at a normal human walk. So that's how slow this storm has been moving across the Caribbean, and every day just gathering up more and more moisture and strength. And it's amazing what we're seeing. I hate to be fascinated by it as a scientist. I know a lot of us are. We've seen some amazing satellite pictures because the devastation on the ground is going to be horrible. But it is one for the scientific history books.
Unfortunately, it is. And another thing that caught us off guard yesterday, how surprised were you to hear that the Hurricane Hunter aircraft had to turn around yesterday?
Yeah, I thought back to an interview that I did with some Hurricane Hunter pilots several years ago. And I asked them for stories, and I asked them what it's like, because the only thing I ever fly on is a Southwest flight. And they said they prefer flying into a well-organized, powerful storm, because you go into a depression and a tropical storm and it's getting its act together. It doesn't know what it wants to be in life, and things are all disarray. Its hair is messed up. It's a hot mess, and you never know what you're going to fly into. But with a strong, well-organized hurricane, these pilots told me they know what to expect. They're ready for it. They can plan accordingly. So yeah, I was really surprised when I think it's now 2 missions have had to turn around because the turbulence was so bad. They were worried there was some damage to the airframe of the airplane, and that would be bad. So they had to hightail it back to base. And I've never heard of that before.
Juliana, that's what you have pulled up here, right?
So this is the now latest. I think this is the Air Force recon mission, and what you and I had just talked about before we got started here is that. So these are live readings, live data coming in with the recon mission, wind speed, surface pressure. It's still picking up on surface pressure at about 892 millibars, but 10-second sustained wind speeds, they're seeing, at least at their flight level, 206 mile per hour winds. And also that's something that's been communicated in the forecast from the National Hurricane Center has been, unfortunately, for the mountainous terrain, the mountainous terrain of Jamaica and really many of these Caribbean islands, being a problem for the rainfall and exacerbating the rainfall forecast and being a significant issue for, the valley areas, but then also these communities that live up in the mountains and people that live up in the mountains with wind speeds being upwards of 30% stronger than what the forecast reflects for the surface level wind speeds. So that's also another kicker here in this forecast, is just how incredibly devastating it is in every element of the forecast for this area.
Absolutely. And so I was just checking again for landfall. We've got to be getting close. Let's check back in on our live camera from Sea Jamaica. Now, this is in Kingston Harbor, and Sea Jamaica has given us permission. And so this is on the weaker side of the storm. This is on the north and eastern side of Jamaica. So the worst of it is, of course, on the southwestern side, but you can still see how rough it's getting there. This would not be the storm surge side. This side would be more affected by wind and, of course, the freshwater flooding as well, because when the rain falls in the mountains, it has to go somewhere. The coastal side will get the rain will just run off into the ocean. It's the non-coastal side of the mountains that were more worried about that devastating flooding. And so it's the better scenario for rainfall. But of course, you do have the waves and you do have the rise in sea level on the right side of the eyes, where the worst of the storm surge is going to be. And so this is this is a interactive program. If you use our hashtags, #HeyRebecca, #HeyWes, or #HeyJuliana, we will be able to bring in your questions. And some of those questions are already rolling in, some of them from TikTok, some of them from Instagram, some of them from Facebook. Wherever you're watching us, if you have a question, please go ahead and drop those hashtags so that we can pull it in. This one's from Livy. #HeyJuliana. How bad can this be for Jamaica?
Unfortunately, this is in every way a worst case scenario event. The rainfall forecast, feet of rain that, for different parts of the country here in the United States, 30 inches of rain is what some areas see in a season in terms of rainfall, just to kind of put it into perspective. And that's something like with Hurricane Ian in Southwest Florida, we had seen 26, 27 inches of rainfall. And so that freshwater flooding, we're talking upwards of 15 feet of storm surge. I think they said 9 to 13 feet above ground level flooding along the coastline. And then you tack on top of it. So not only are the coastal communities getting slammed with water, but then you have these valley areas and the freshwater flooding being an issue as well, because any really terrain has no chance of absorbing that kind of rainfall in such a short period of time. And especially when you take a step back. We've been talking about this for days, but some folks may just now be tuning into this forecast for Melissa. This storm has been so slow moving and just hanging out here in the Northern Caribbean, dumping rain for days across portions of Haiti, the Dominican, and into Jamaica. And that's also, something as well important about this forecast is while Jamaica is getting the brunt of the storm in every way, Haiti and the Dominican are also forecast to be dealing with life-threatening landslides, flash flooding, as well as then into Cuba later today, making that second landfall likely overnight into potentially early tomorrow. This is particularly the graph forecast. This is not the National Hurricane Center's official forecast, but this is, that's also part of what makes this so heartbreaking to see, is so many communities impacted by one storm.
And we have another question coming in. This one's for Wes, #HeyWes. So if you're on a mountain, will they be safe? And so this is going back to what you were talking about with the flooding. And safe is a pretty relative term in this situation, unfortunately.
Yeah, you're going to have less rain, quote unquote, on a mountain than you would at the base of the mountain, because all the water is going to go to the base of the mountain. But here's the problem. The higher up you go in elevation, the stronger the winds will be. And, we've got gusts over 200 miles an hour, sustained winds at 185. So sure, you might have less rain, but you're still going to have 20, 30 inches. But higher up, you're going to be less protected than a lower elevation. And when you've got strong winds, you're going to have trees come down, you're going to have structures come down. And I think that's going to be the biggest problem for Jamaica. Most of the island, they're going to survive and be okay when the storm approaches with all the rain. But when those winds start to knock out power and then really do some devastation, I think the right now and the coming week is going to be the worst part of Jamaica, because the recovery and the problems they're going to have after this storm moves through, that's going to be the worst part.
Even with landfalling tropical systems that aren't this strong, we oftentimes get more injuries and more deaths in that post-storm cleanup between people using generators incorrectly or pulling out the chainsaw for the first time ever. And so this is just going to be exacerbated by the fact that it is an island. It is going to be hard to get supplies to it. We don't know how the airport's going to look after this, if we're going to be able to fly in immediately or if we're going to have to come up with alternative solutions to get aid to this area, because we just really don't know how bad it could get and what kind of structures will be affected. I've been following people on social media that are kind of stuck over there. They went over there for maybe a destination wedding and couldn't get out before the airport closed. And so they're in those bigger resorts. And it does look like the resorts are doing the best that they can to take care of these people. One in particular, they've gathered everybody in the resort in the ballroom because there's no windows. And so they were talking about putting as many walls between you and the storm as you could, and then trying to not be under trees, because even palm trees can't survive these winds, and palm trees are, the survivors of all of the storms, but this is just really unprecedented.
It reaches a point, where, and I know I'd seen some comparisons online as well with the Eyewall of this particular storm, and this having at least throughout this morning been a 10-mile wide eye, that the winds along the Eyewall are comparable to an EF4 tornado, if not at this point probably a greater tornado strength, and that's always what we communicated is run from water, hide from wind, and it does reach a point with a landfalling storm that you're treating this like a tornadic event, and so unfortunately as well, something to keep in mind is the state of these communities to begin with. Likely a lot of these communities being poorer communities. I myself have seen pictures of people using cinder blocks and putting cinder blocks on their roofs to try to prevent the roof from blowing off. And of course, as we know, likely, futile against this type of a storm.
Our next question is coming in from Ashley Darnell. Hashtag, hey, Rebecca, how bad are the storm surges predicted to be? And so the storm surges are going to be very, very specific to basically the right side of the eye. And they were calling for 6 to 15 feet of storm surge in some cases. And so the winds are going counterclockwise around this. So from the right edge of the eye all the way out towards Kingston, that's where the worst of the storm surges are going to be. And so that's where we're going to see those catastrophic waves over 10 feet in some cases. And that's really can be the most devastating element of a storm. I think this one in particular might be an outlier just because the winds are so strong and the inland flooding is going to be so bad from rainfall and the fact that it's moving so slowly. Juliana just talked about basically it's as strong as a tornado, but it's lasting for over a day because it's moving so slowly. And so we still don't have official landfall yet. Landfall is when the center of the storm, the center of the eye makes its way over land. It looks like we are getting close, but once again, because this is moving so slowly, it's just going to be increasingly devastating as we continue to watch it move on shore.
Yeah. Hey, Rebecca, can you pull back up that Kingston Bay camera?
Yep.
Because I was just doing some calculations. So landfall is going to be about 80 miles away from that camera. So that's a long way away from the center, from where the worst. So this camera is not going to get 185 mile per hour winds. It's also a little bit protected. So this is probably going to be one of the only working cameras we have, but it's not going to be the worst of conditions. And then I was just reading the latest update from the Hurricane Center, which was the 11 a.m. And so hurricane force winds only extend out, I say only 30 miles. So this camera is 80 miles away from the center of the storm. So yeah, I mean, it doesn't look like a good beach day, but I mean, that's not even close to the worst conditions on the other side of the island.
No, we won't get video of that until some of the storm chasers that are hunkered down out there make it back to civilization. And that could be weeks, just depending on if the airport gets closed or not. And so that's, what we're watching now. We're very appreciative to see Jamaica for sharing this camera with us, but please don't let this be an accurate depiction in your mind of what's going on 80 miles, to the west of this camera. Our next question coming in is hashtag, hey, Juliana, how long in hours, will the eye be over land in Jamaica, and will it strengthen back up prior to its second landfall? And man, this is a doozy, because unfortunately it's going to be, this is moving so slowly. It's going to be one of those situations where the eye is over land probably longer than Jamaica's ever seen the eye be over land from any storm. I can't remember a storm moving this slowly for this long.
Exactly. Right now, and again, kind of using what tools we have here, and the graph forecast is a little faster than the current movement. So, this is depicting as of this 12 o'clock hour or so, the storm already having made land. We have yet to actually see landfall. So we can kind of extrapolate from there, where in this case, this is still showing the eye all the way up until mid-afternoon. And so then, given where we're at right now, probably all the way through at least this evening, if not even probably parts of tonight, for Jamaica, until that really, but even then you still see those hurricane force winds scraping the northern coast of Jamaica. So it's going to be quite some time, likely not until the overnight, or really even late tonight, at least, that they'll be dealing with the Eyewall, if not at least those hurricane force winds, because like Wes had mentioned, the hurricane force winds extend right now 30 miles away from the center of the storm. So even once the eye is offshore off the north shore of Jamaica, they'll still be putting up with, if not hurricane force winds, damaging winds. And then looking to the overnight into tomorrow to make that second landfall. But the, slight weakening, nothing incredibly impressive still, I think, forecast to make landfall in Cuba as a Category 4 hurricane. So, Category 5, Category 4, devastating one way or another. 150 miles per hour wind speeds, at least with that particular part of the forecast of the National Hurricane Center. And then potentially, approaching the Bahamas. This has kind of fluctuated a little bit, but as a weakening major hurricane. Still going to be a hurricane, likely a Category 2, maybe Category 3 hurricane as it washes over the Bahamas as well.
Our next question coming in. Is it typical for the second half of the eye passes to be worse than the first half? And that's really a dependent question, because the wind will change direction, and sometimes that's more beneficial to you. Like if you were on the right side of the eye, once the eye passes, the wind changes direction a little bit, so it may help the storm surge go down a little bit, but there's no real difference in terms of winds measured. It's just that typically we call the top right from the eye the dirty side of the storm, and that's where we typically see the worst of the storm. So you may be experiencing a different quadrant of the hurricane after the eye passes, and that may feel a little different, but it's still the same strength of winds, unfortunately.
And a lot of times when these forward-moving storms are coming at you, you've got to calculate their forward-moving speed into the overall wind field. But if this thing's only moving 10 miles an hour, then that normally top right quadrant, which, listen, it's going to be horrible. It's not like the storm's moving 25 miles an hour and you got to tack on another 25, but
this is just hard to watch.
Still no. I was kind of good doing some calculations, Juliana, while you were talking, and it looks like that western part of Jamaica is about 40 miles top to bottom. And so the model that you showed, if it's moving 10 miles an hour, it's going to take a good 4 hours for the eye to get all the way across land before it moves back out to sea.
Interesting that this system had very few steering currents, but once it did start to move, there hasn't been much change. Like if you looked at the graph 2 days ago, it showed a Black River landfall, and that's exactly what's happening on this satellite right here. So for a storm that's not behaving like typical hurricanes do, it's interesting that the models picked up and have had pretty good consensus once it actually formed as to where this would end up and how it was going to behave. If you look at that, the original path, it meanders quite a bit before it gets here, but even 4 days ago, it predicted the turn towards Jamaica in basically this location. So the forecast models are getting much more impressive than they were when I started, because they looked a lot more like cooked spaghetti then.
Yeah.
All right. The next question coming in. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say Black River, I think many of us know Jamaica from, vacations or cruise stops, but like Black River is not a major tourist area like Kingston or Ocho Rios or Montego Bay. I think the major tourism centers, which is what Jamaica lives off of, they're a tourism industry island. I think the major tourism centers are going to be spared a direct hit on the south side. They're going to catch the back end of it, of course, but Black River not as dominant a tourist spot as the rest of the spots in the island.
And hopefully the tourist spots might have some structures that the locals from the Black River area could get to and be out of the worst of this. This one's coming in from Robert Oakley IV. Hashtag Hey Wes, with storms gaining rapid intensity, do you feel like it's time to adjust the Simpson scale?
Ooh, I feel like this is, should we make a category 6?
Yes.
No, I don't think it's a good idea to make a new scale because other parts of our weather industry have adjusted scales over the years, and it serves for more confusion than to organize things better. I think we're good with 5. Think over the years, how many times have we made it up to a Cat 5? Very rarely. Granted, we've had 3 this year, but over history, especially storms that make landfall in the United States, very rarely in the whole big scheme of things do we have a Cat 5. I'm thinking of the Storm Prediction Center, and several years ago, they reorganized their level of severe storm, tornadoes, hail, and damaging wind. And I think it made things more complicated. And when you make things more complicated and it's hard to understand, people don't understand or they tune out. And so I don't want to do that. Let's keep it as simple as possible. We've known category 1 through 5 forever. Let's keep it there. You know, the category 5 range is, help me out, 165 and above. So whether that's 185 or 200, we're covered in the very rare instances. So
hard to tell the difference between 185 and 200.
Right. I'm not going to split hairs with you, right?
Yeah, exactly. If you're watching on our downloading streaming app from TV, you're going to lose us in about 2 minutes, but I'm hoping you guys would want to stick around until landfall with me. And you can watch on Facebook, on trackingthetropics.tv, on Instagram Live and TikTok Live. If you have to go, Wes, just let us know. But I'm hoping to kind of wait for landfall with this one. I wanted to check back in on our See Jamaica camera really quickly. Once again, noting that these are not the hurricane force winds. This is about 80 miles away in Kingston Harbor, but still looking really rough out there. The next question coming in, hashtag Hey Rebecca, hashtag Hey Juliana, and hashtag Hey Wes. Best guess as to what the Bahamas may face and when. And the good news is the Bahamas won't face anything like this. It's not going to be a good day, but we're not talking about a category 5 sitting over you for hours and hours and hours on end for the Bahamas.
Exactly. The forecast, gradually, we also, what has been consistent in the forecast is in the short term, long term, relatively speaking, is the upper levels, kind of the steering kind of kicking into gear, helping to then usher Melissa out to sea and usher that northeasterly movement and kind of pick up the pace a little bit. So generally, it should be a little bit swifter moving and kind of in and out compared to, like, you said, not necessarily sitting over the Bahamas for hours and hours and hours. But it'll be a weakening, still a hurricane, and still something to take seriously, but definitely not comparable to what Jamaica's facing right now.
Our next,
if I could, complain a little in having to do with this question, I'm up here in North Carolina and we've got this low pressure. We've got a dip in the jet stream. It's bringing us horrible weather. I mean, it's 50 degrees. It's rainy. We got 30-mile-an-hour wind gusts, no sunshine in sight. But it's that dip in the jet stream that's picking up and speeding away from the United States, Melissa. So a lot of us are complaining on the East Coast today because we've got horrible weather, but it's that horrible weather jet stream dip that is kicking this system away from the United States. Otherwise, we might be dealing with a hurricane landfall in the coming days.
Well, we appreciate you for taking one for the team and getting the system out of here. I'm going to switch over to the See Jamaica camera and talk for a minute while I give Juliana and Wes a moment to read the 1 o'clock update and provide us with the latest from the National Hurricane Center. I still don't have any notification of landfall, but they typically do put out a 1 p.m. update when they start to update things hourly when a system is approaching land like this. And so what we've been watching with Hurricane Melissa is that it looks like it might not have come down just yet. So we'll watch it live and we'll watch it together here. Okay. We're still looking at the 12 o'clock update where it was 30 miles southeast of Negril, Jamaica, and closer to Montego Bay there. So once it comes in, I'll pop you guys off camera so you can read and we won't have to look at the top of your heads. But once again, we are waiting for landfall. We're getting close. Landfall occurs when the center of the eye makes its way from water onto land. There can be multiple landfalls. Like this will make its first landfall here in Jamaica. Its secondary landfall is expected over Cuba, and we are unfortunately talking worst case scenario for parts of Jamaica. And as Wes noted earlier, it is a part of Jamaica that is more local and not as touristy, and so a lot of times the structures aren't quite as robust as some of the more touristy locations. I've been following a lot of people on social media. It looks like the resorts allowed a lot of people to enter their ballrooms and enter their bigger structures and try to stay safe from this storm, because when the sun rises tomorrow, because the system's not clearing out anytime soon, it is going to be absolute devastation in parts of Jamaica. And so we do have another question coming in. Hashtag, hey, Rebecca, will Montego Bay get hit hard? And so Montego Bay is in an interesting location because they are so close there, but they're getting the onshore winds as the storm approaches. And so they're going to see the worst of the storm surge because right now they've got sideways winds based on where the eye is. As the eye continues to track northward, the winds will change a little bit, and so they're going to get hit hard. Absolutely, not nearly as hard as Black River and just to the east of Black River all the way to Mandeville. That's going to be ground zero for the storm surge.
Hey, Rebecca, we have landfall.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Yeah, the 1 p.m. update just came in.
Excellent. And so it looks like the 1 p.m. update just came in. I'm going to let Juliana and Wes read up on that. We're going to take a closer look at the official satellite here. They've declared landfall. It's 1:03 p.m. Once they get through reading the update, they can let us know. Here's that 1 p.m. update. Still seeing maximum winds of 185 miles per hour. That minimum central pressure is still 892. So that would be the official tying of the lowest pressure for a landfalling system, tying with the Labor Day hurricane that, like we talked about earlier on the program. It's still moving to the northeast only at 9 miles per hour. Jamaica is about 40 miles wide in the expected path that we're going to see this. So that's going to spend at least 4 hours, the eye over Jamaica. The eye itself is not very big. It's very compact. Here's a comparison like we were just talking about. That minimum central pressure making landfall at 892 millibars. That's tying that Labor Day hurricane from 1935. So historic in addition to catastrophic. What did you guys read in that 1 o'clock update?
Not a whole lot. It's pretty much exactly, unfortunately, what we kind of expected to shake out. So it's made landfall southwestern Jamaica near New Hope with 185 mile per hour winds, minimum central pressure of 892. So it is official now that this has tied the Labor Day hurricane for the strongest, most intense Atlantic hurricane landfalling system on record as of this afternoon. Wes, is there anything that maybe you caught that I didn't? Unfortunately.
I don't see. Yeah, it was a short update. The 1 o'clock update, as opposed to the 11 a.m. and the 5 p.m., which are much more thorough. The 1 o'clock is just a quick hit. Hey, here's a quick update. We're going to get back to investigating this. So what struck me, though, is how long this has been a Category 5. If you think about what it takes on our planet to sustain a massive storm like this, it's hard to do it. Kind of like if you redline your car, eventually engine's not going to like it and shut down, right? Mm-hmm. Usually Category 5 storms fall apart a little and then maybe they regenerate, but this one hasn't budged. I mean, this one is going full steam and showed no signs of weakening any. So, there was a hope that, maybe it'll fall apart a little, or Eyewall replacement cycle and it'll weaken temporarily before landfall. It didn't do that. The pressure didn't go up. The winds didn't go down. I mean, this thing just stayed a monster. And I'm just kind of looking so the way Jamaica is shaped, Jamaica does a lot of this on the southern border. And there's like this little cove that the hurricane has made landfall. And I think for storm surge purposes, that has protected that camera we've been looking at in Kinston. In fact, not in Kinston, in Kingston. Kinston is a town here in North Carolina. Kingston, that camera right there, is not only protected, kind of tucked back in a bay, but there's also this little nub that sticks out on the south part of Jamaica that is also probably protecting Kingston from having huge storm surge inundation. So there's some good news with the way this is hitting, but there's still going to be a lot of bad news in the coming days.
Indeed. And so official landfall has been declared as of that 1 p.m. update. We're going to take one more final round of questions, and then we'll take our thoughts, and then we will wrap it because we are weather nerds and we do want to get to our computers to start watching what's going on with this system. So, hey, Wes, is a smaller, tighter eye of the storm bad?
Yes, because usually a smaller, tighter eye means stronger winds. So think of your favorite figure skater in the Winter Olympics. When they start to pull their arms in, they start to spin faster, right? Same thing with a hurricane. When it gets smaller and tighter, usually spins faster. Now, the good news in that is if the eye is smaller, the worst of the weather is going to impact less area. So there's good and bad. A bigger eye that is maybe spinning slower is going to impact more people with less intensity, but a smaller eye, less people with higher intensity. So there's good and bad to both.
Juliana, I just wanted to get your kind of final thoughts on this system. We've been watching it for days now. We will learn so much more about how the system behaved. You know, I'm interested to see how the eye survives over some of the mountains in that region. A lot of times mountains can be an absolute killer of tropical systems, but this one's so powerful. But the good news is it's spending a lot of time over those mountains because it's moving so slowly. So what are your thoughts? We're going to start to wrap things up here on Tracking the Tropics for this episode.
Yes, I think... really just thinking of the people here in Jamaica, as well as, the communities in Cuba, in Haiti, that are also, unfortunately dealing with, I just can't help but think back to, and I mentioned this throughout the season because it's going to forever be one of, if not the, strongest storm I'll ever experience as a meteorologist, Hurricane Ian, and how daunting it was to see the sun the next day, or in this case, after the storm passes. And, just thinking of the folks out there, because this is going to be a very long day, but then also remembering how long the recovery is going to take, especially for this being a small island. Like you said before, we don't know what the airport or airports are going to look like after this is done. So hoping for what we hope for, a relatively quick recovery for these areas.
And Wes, you've been tracking storms for a long time. What are your thoughts on this one?
Well, we've spent the last 30 minutes talking specifically about Melissa, and we're lucky enough to watch it from afar here in the United States. I'm starting to think about this could be it for the Atlantic hurricane season. Melissa's the 13th named storm. Last year we had 18. We did not have a hurricane landfall in mainland United States. And there's nothing else out there down the pike that's showing any signs. We're getting more and more cold fronts. So Melissa, while it is a disastrous storm, maybe it's the last hurricane or storm that we have to talk about this year. And that's always great news for meteorologists and people who live along the coast. So I'm starting to think and maybe look back at the whole season and with hopefulness look ahead that this could be it for the Atlantic hurricane season.
That is a very comforting thought that this is the last storm we may be dealing with. We had a heck of a season last year for Florida, and unfortunately it looks like this year it's Jamaica that's going to bear the brunt of the hurricane season. We didn't have much in terms of landfall. Bermuda didn't have a good season, but Jamaica is certainly, unfortunately, having the worst of it. Oof.
And this is the third Cat 5, only 13 named storms. Of the ones that became hurricanes, 3 of them were Cat 5s. It's such an unusual season, a little less busy than we thought, but the intensity of the few storms we did have was amazing. And for us in North Carolina, the Carolinas, our worst storm was a tropical storm. It was Chantal. It dropped 12 inches of rain in a couple hours in one spot, and just a very strange season. I think we're all going to be happy, though, that it's over.
Absolutely. We're going to leave you with one more look powered by Sea Jamaica of Kingston Bay, Jamaica, Kingston Harbor. And this is 80 miles away from the center of the storm, not experiencing hurricane force winds, but you can see how how conditions are already going down there. They're protected, as Wes described a little bit earlier. So this camera does have a chance to stay up longer than the cameras that are elsewhere in Jamaica. Unfortunately, we will probably be talking about Melissa again next week here on Tracking the Tropics, but we will have a better picture of exactly what Melissa did, hopefully, and the road to recovery and how that looks. Thanks so much for joining us, Wes. Thank you so much, Juliana, for doing all the heavy lifting for this show. From the streaming center at WFLA, we are signing off on Tracking the Tropics.